Welcome to the new cyber frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new cyber frontier.
Welcome to New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Tim Montgomery, and I have two hosts here, Mr. Jim Lacey and Mr. L. Ortiz. Good morning or good evening. I think we're in the noontime right now. To both of you gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks for having us, Tim.
Yeah, so I guess we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of the topics that I'm thinking of here. We're talking about data leaks. You've got some good information on it there, per se, on ransomware and some of the other designations of like CMMC components and, kind of the threat between ransomware and how that's being affected in today's economy. So I know we've picked up conversations already about how the ransomware has impacted, just the last colonial issue in the news here in the past week. But first, I want to let each one of you introduce yourselves, just a little bit about each one, each one of you, so we can kind of get the audience in kind of in tune with why we're talking to you two. So, if you don't mind, Jim, would you start out, please, for us?
Sure. Yeah, so I've been in the technology space for quite some time now. I used to run CompUSA's training operations out of Dallas, and then I moved on to Silicon Valley to Linux services startup, and from there ended up running the Linux Professional Institute for about 15 years, built a global Linux certification channel there, and then came out to Colorado Springs to build a cybersecurity company. And now I'm working as the COO with Al to build out a cybersecurity software company, primarily representing a few really innovative products, DriveLock, and also some blockchain technologies.
Yeah, you had a lot to do with the Linux certifications, didn't you? Actually setting that up for that company and really orchestrating that whole service behind, association to actually getting the Linux out there as actual certifications, didn't you? You had a lot to do with that in that company when you were doing it. So.
Yeah. We built the Linux Professional Institute from a handful of countries when I came on board to being in about 35. Having a presence in about 35 countries worldwide and delivering exams in every country on the planet. So
yeah, Linux is a big component of Kali Linux, and we all know, which is a very, very driven tool set for all cybersecurity professionals. So such a great platform to be able to set a good tool set on, right? So thank you for that, Jim. Nice to meet you there. Mr. Ortiz, if you would, please.
Yeah, hi, Tim.
Hi.
So just a little bit of background about me. So I've been working with cyber software distributors and started the company about 3 years ago now, focusing on the Americas as our geography. So basically everything from Alaska to Argentina. So we're responsible for endpoint security with our DriveLock product. My background, I started in IT back in the early 2000s with Hewlett Packard, going through a number of positions within the company, and then moving to some other ERP and service management software, and started up CSD here in Colorado Springs. Academically, I'm working on a doctorate right now in information systems with regard to one of the topics of data leaks in IoT, IT and OT as well. So there's some things that, certainly with regard to what's been happening with Colonial, in the popular media, that would be a great starting point for us. But we're looking forward to the conversation, and thanks for having us again.
Sounds great. Okay, well, That kind of includes our idea of where we're headed for as conversation goes. I wanted to get with you, Mr. Ortiz, about how data leaks kind of genuinely seem to possess in today's economics, such as ransomware and how it contributes to the downfall and why cybersecurity would be more or less, something that would be a driving force to support, remedies, solving problems for what
Yeah.
data leaks do to us.
Yeah, and so, here's the one thing, Tim, is that when we're looking at data leaks, there's a couple ways to kind of look at this, and we kind of look at it from a little bit longer term perspective, right? Is number one, these data leaks are happening because the current systems are already there in place with security, right?
Yeah.
So when they're there, they're happening outside of the typical setup, or the way that security's already been set up for an organization. So we have to kind of assess, well, if that's the case, where are they coming from, first of all, because you may not even know that they're there. I want to say there was a statistic out there that on average, you really don't know that you've been taken from a cyber perspective for 45 days minimum, right?
Yeah.
So when that happens, where is this data leak coming from?
Ortiz, we're going to take a
The
break. I'm sorry, sir. We'll catch you right after the break is. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
Welcome back to the New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Tim Montgomery, and today we're talking to Mr. Jim Lacey. James Lacey had some good work with the organization for Foundation of Linux, the Cali Linux Supportives, and Mr. Al Ortiz. To get that right, sir?
You got it right.
Thank you. And he was before the break, he was talking about some of the data leaks, and we got into 3 supplemental components of the data leaks and some of the impacts there. So if you wouldn't mind, sir, just go right into what you were saying prior to the break there.
Yeah, so Tim, with regard to that, looking at some of the researches, first of all, you got to find out where the data leak's coming from, and then kind of determine where is it coming from. So within your organization, 3 possible areas. There's always more, but primarily, is it your technology that is allowing those leaks to happen? Is it your processes that are happening in the organization, or is it the people, or a combination thereof, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're finding is that a lot of things could happen with regard to these data leaks, and they could, each one of these nodes within the system from a technology standpoint is pretty important. So you've got routers, switches, you even have thermostats that are Wi-Fi connected, and they all have some certain value to the organization in terms of how they work and what they contribute to the IT or information system process.
Right.
That's from the IT or IS perspective. But when you look at it from security, guess what? That Wi-Fi thermostat inside of your building is just as important, and could be a data leak from there as a server, laptop, or a router could be.
That's
So
true.
you have to treat them all 100% securely.
Right. The Internet of Things. I've had an opportunity in the past few weeks to go over and contribute to a course curriculums for Internet of Things for a different institute. And there's certainly dialogue there about how the emphasis of the Internet of Things do not have common cybersecurity components, best practices woven into them. So it becomes big vulnerabilities for data leaks. certainly gives the edge to just several things I can think of in the economics of our world through virtual, through the platforms that we actually interact with. So Lexus to like you said, the refrigerators to your temperature and your thermostats inside your house that can cause certain open gaps inside your networks that lead way to vulnerabilities like that. So yeah, definitely important factors here.
Yeah. And then when you look at the other 2 points, right, with regard to your processes, how secure are those? One of the case studies we read, an academic article was, at a hospital, and they were implementing some software, and one of the processes with the nurses, she was carrying around all of the medicines for the patients, but she was tired of opening and closing her laptop to lock it down. So she just left it on the trolley, going from patient to patient without locking it down. And there would be times she would leave the machine open. So that
Hmm,
process, they told her, you need to lock it down every time you step away. And,
true.
and that wasn't being followed. So
That was
that,
interesting.
that's a simple process.
Yeah, DoD world says that a lot about the cat card, right? You pull that cat card, you
Yeah.
better lock that machine. That's has something. Even when we're in secure areas, you know, they're
Yeah.
still hunting your cat card, right? So
Yeah,
definitely.
exactly. And then lastly, what are the people doing, right? Are they taking data they're not supposed to? Are they loading in, going to their music and checking things out online? Or are they opening up apps they're not supposed to on their work machine? The working from home, right, with the COVID pandemic has kind of showed us that, there's a mix between our home data, maybe looking at your bank statements or paying bills on your work computer, and then going to your software applications for work, and where is that being meshed and combined. So the people have a big part in this as well, and really in the environments that an organization has, you have to think about all three of these topics.
Well, you're definitely right. The insider threat idea is what comes to mind when you were just
Mhm.
referring to people. Going back to that equation about the hospitals, and I think they're the most common denominator when it comes to ransomware. And we just saw something recently in the news about the ransomware that hit pipelines here recently. I believe it stopped. I think it was like 45% productivity in the oil industry. That was a massive lot. You saw, people kind of a bit of hysteria going in a lot of the gas stations needing gas, backing up miles. So it certainly is doing the trick. Jim, you have some things to do with the ransomware and some of the other components, like the one in the hospital there. I think it was they usually get locked down, and it usually comes through someone's email. And the biggest contributors are usually a phishing email that comes into play, or insider threats where they brought in something that opened up a vulnerability that they personally shouldn't have had on their computers. So I mean,
Yeah, I mean, in various different companies, I've worked with the cyber forensics folks. We worked with some very, very large financial institutions, but ransomware is not just specific to enterprise companies. I mean, it hits all kinds of businesses. I think the average statistic now is something near about $225,000 uh, in payments demanded by cyber criminals that launch some version of uh, attack. And I won't bore you with phishing admonitions because everybody knows that you really shouldn't click on a link that you don't know who it's from or where it's going. But it's still human nature, and unfortunately, phishing attacks seem to be the largest percentage of violation by employees that work at any company. And of course, they're getting much more sophisticated now. So
that's true.
there's a lot of social engineering that goes along with that, as everyone knows. And Many times you'll get messages that look very real, and it seems like it's something you need to do because it's coming from a senior person in the company. But the best thing you can do is pick up the phone and call that person, or have something prearranged with them that they would never do. And you would know that. So there are ways to combat this, but um, many more attacks are happening these days because more people are working from home, given the onset of the COVID issue that we just are getting through now, which means they're operating on, in some cases, networks that are much less secure. And so cyber criminals know that, and they are launching more and more attacks because of that. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I know that the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack is on everybody's mind because we're talking about double-digit percentages locking down gasoline. Uh,
Right.
you know,
Driving up prices too, right?
you know, Georgia, I think, is over 10% now in gasoline outages, and North Carolina is at 16%. So,
Yeah.
and those numbers might rise. So, this is a large problem, and it's not going to be combated overnight.
That's true. Well, that being said, we're going to take another break. So we'll be right back after a mention from our sponsors. Hey, welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Tim Montgomery. Today we're speaking with Mr. Jim Lacey and Mr. Al Ortiz. Sir, did get that right? So
Perfect.
I will get it. It'll roll off my tongue before the end of the show, right? That's how it always works. And Mr. Lacey was referring back to before the break was talking about ransomware and the impact of our economy and how detrimental data leaks can be to not just small businesses but overall across the country. How that seems to drive prices as well. Some of the other bigger factors. And in today's society, I think cybersecurity is getting more and more important and more serious. I hope companies out there, at least I'm seeing trends of a lot of individual companies looking for more and more of the engineer role to come in and play support for the actual accreditation processes, things that are coming our way that we've never seen before. I know the framework and some of the supply chain mechanisms, some of those things are starting to trend where more and more companies are starting to relate to one another, and as they do business with one another, it's driving a trend to actually have a better cybersecurity posture. Just with ransomware, let alone some of the other factors, inside threat is a bigger one. I think it takes the cake on majority of cybersecurity threats these days. Honestly, that was something as when I worked with the Missile Defense Agency for quite a few years there, that was one of the bigger driving ordeals. I mean, you think about it. You can drive through a gate, and then you drive through armed guards, and you go through a turnstile and a pin, and you got to go through another turnstile and another gate and another pin, and then you got to go through a couple locked doors that had a couple of permission sets on them, some passwords, all before you got to your desk and sat down. So it could take you 25 minutes just to get from the car to sitting at the desk to log in. And then on top of that, the desk, or the computer itself had to have a card too to get in. So lots of layers there, but I could see how those defense in depth idea, all those layers would support elements that would prevent data leakage and things of that nature. But that insider threat somehow played a big role. And the phishing idea, I know that you're right. those factors are kind of in play all the time. But as you, if both of you've ever went through one of those phishing ordeals where you've calculated the odds and you're hoping and wishing that everybody's going to pass the test, and come to find out 98% of them didn't. So I've seen that 3 times now, and I'm talking about agencies. So you can only imagine what the training guy was like. Man, we got our work cut out for us. So um, either you had any ordeals or run into with what do you think on the phishing, the idea behind a phishing attack, and the concept behind the testing of a phishing attack?
So I'll touch on it briefly. I mean, some of the things that we're seeing is that some of the perpetrators, if you will, on the phishing side are becoming more and more sophisticated, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you used to see fuzzy backgrounds with, the lettering and, hey, this looks a little fishy, pun intended, right, with regard to this. And it's like, why is it in British spelling instead of American spelling, and little things like
Misspelled
that we
words.
could kind of detect.
Right.
So it's like, let's just delete this one. But in today's world, right? I mean, as easy as it can get, with, you know, getting, fonts and having people more sophisticated on the tech side to be able to do this is, hey, I can make the call to these folks and try to generate, hey, what can I get out of these guys? Maybe a password if I'm lucky, maybe IP address, something that, hey, especially with municipalities, for example, the people at municipalities are all listed on the website for the cities,
That's true.
right?
It's public
So
access, right?
yeah, you got to have public access, and I mean their phone numbers are there, their emails are typically there. So how far do we need to think about where the sophistication point can get in, and even to a point where, hey, I've got to go pay my electric bill, right,
Hmm.
with a city or utility, that could be another angle to consider as well. There's a great case study, a use case, Tim, that's not even IT per se.
Hmm.
It was actually an foreign affairs periodical that after Stuxnet happened over in Iran, there was actually an attack on an Israeli water source utility. And with their situation there, well, that's almost state sponsored to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Uh, and so yeah, it's not just individuals, it's not just municipalities, but we're seeing utilities, we're seeing some of these folks that can get fished, and it can turn out to be some pretty bad stuff.
Well, you're right. The smaller companies don't have the ability or resources. I was chatting with a gentleman about different types of services, like having a virtual chief information security service come in and support the smaller end businesses or mediocre businesses. Um, the effort behind it seemed like they're getting into supply chain management, and I know in the DoD world, the bigger companies now are having to support the smaller vendors because they don't have that capability. And some of the components that are now starting to enter the arena, like your CMMC type of scenarios and things like that. So, you guys, what do you think about how the impact is today? I mean, the maturity that's going to have to happen to those small businesses according to that relationship with the bigger ones. So, I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Jim?
Yeah, that is a topic on everybody's mind, especially in a market like Colorado Springs, where you've got many defense contractors, you've got numerous military bases here. Um, CMMC, as most people know, if they've heard of it and they want to be a DoD contractor, they will have to attain a certain level of compliance
Right.
once it's fully rolled out. And it's really just an evolution of something like 801.71, which a lot of companies were working toward that level of certification, and then there are various ISO certs and things. But CMMC is now starting to take shape. Um, there are 5 levels of CMMC. Most contracts, from what we're hearing, is that companies would need to be in compliance up to level 3.
That's right.
4 and 5 is kind of a higher level standard, but that will be a requirement for DoD contracts in the future, as opposed to 800-171, where you could still have a program in place to address the issues that you were facing based on certain security controls. But CMMC is going to have a complete auditing function to it, where auditors will then come to your place of business and ensure that you're attaining the control level that maps to whatever level it is that's mandated by the contract. And that's also a flow down, right, from the prime.
Right.
So if a prime contractor is looking to engage with a subcontractor, they are also responsible to ensure that that subcontractor does have the level of CMMC requirement that's deemed necessary in the contract.
Yeah. So do you think that will probably help with the resolve on things like this? Like being this, there's phishing issues with smaller companies that would interact. I would think it would help support being able to tear that off or make sure that those things don't happen again, or be able to support a posture for cyber for them when it comes to insider threat and those things we were just chatting about. I think that would help them. Do you agree with those things as well?
Well, I agree in the spirit of the certification. That's what it's intended to do, is to lock down the supply chain
Yeah,
in a much more objective way.
Yeah.
I don't know that you can ever take human nature out of the equation when it comes to phishing and the sophisticated people that are very, very skilled at social engineering.
Yeah.
Because really that's a combination of, right? If you're good at phishing and then you back it up with some very well-planned social engineering engagement,
Yeah, you're gonna
that's
get
a
in.
difficult thing for most people to sort of see through if they're not in the cybersecurity world. But I think the intention is well placed. I think there's still a lot of work that has to be done to ensure that that standard is something that a small to medium-sized business can afford to engage with, and that seems to be a topic of conversation right now.
Yeah, you're right. I think. Well, I hope it supports the small business being able to come up in the standard of the posture that they need to protect themselves in today with the virtual platforms that we have to do business in. Um, I know with the if you guys if you've looked out, there's actual on the NREL Renewable Energy Laboratory down in Golden. They actually have different mechanisms that you can sign up with. They've got the like you said, the discovery and being able to look at the controls and actually go through assessment validation as a self-assessment that actually support the smaller companies and the utilities. Looks like too. So they've actually got some tools out there that they've been developing through UC Boulder. So check those things out. I think they support the small business as well, and I think that CMMC, level 3 is a pretty good iteration of your control monitoring or continuous monitoring measures. I think there's a maturity level once you get to 4. It's kind of you're kind of no worries whatsoever, and I don't know if any business truly will ever get to that 80-85 percentile, like we're all hoping for. But I think it's a good set of tools, especially when it comes to the medium and the small business. And I love that support mechanism from the larger businesses. So, I mean, yeah, Mr. Ortiz, you have anything to add on that?
No, just to tag along a little bit further on the economies of it, right? Because we can trace back when we look at MMC, we can almost put a financial value on each one of those points that we need to hit and lock down for an organization. So when we see it, what is it that they're trying to lock down, right? For CMMC, and then you can put not only the financial point on it for organizations and what you would be responsible for as an organization, but you also look at a couple of other things, right? Those secrets or proprietary information that could get out, and you have to put a weight on that. We already talked about the financial piece, but the one thing that's important as well is the reputation, right?
Yes.
Is if that gets out, and especially if you're a smaller player trying to increase your value as a company, how important is that if that gets broken or lost?
That's almost as important, if not more important, I would assume. Right?
Right,
Because your reputation
because-
is everything. It builds on everything: rapport, relationships, and networking with people.
Exactly, and really that's invaluable, because you're looking at possible loss of financing. You're looking at your reputation to maybe some of those primes that you're working with, and then just your public perception of, hey, you know what, these guys did a great job or didn't do a great job because of their cybersecurity. So there's other factors. Although the technical piece is very, very important, you have to keep into consideration from a business perspective and an economic one. What are those other factors that people are really going to have that value point that we have to revolve around with these requirements?
That's so true. That's so true. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate both of you being on. I know we've talked a little bit about how data leaks, affect our economy and affect everyday life, and those smaller businesses. It sounds like that some of the more, the SCCM or CMMC, the idea behind the NIST and the 800 series, has come a long way since it started. And it's manifested in quite a bit of ways. It's got dialogue in the Department of Energy, and it's got starting to build out what they call the C2 M2s. If you guys look those up, they're starting to call them that. There's different distributions of this, it seems to be now, because the Department of Agriculture's got its own set of dialogues that it can do assessments with. And the Department of Energy's kind of got its own dialogues now that they're using through UC Boulder, I think it is. So we've kind of touched base on how the maturity levels are starting to come up and the compliance and the importance for cybersecurity across the board, especially with the way those hackers out there seem to be redefining our world every day, right? So thank both of you gentlemen for being on, and hopefully we'll have you on again. I appreciate you my second time through, so thank you for putting up with that part of it. Yes, this is New Cyber Frontier, and I'm Tim Montgomery, your host, and that's it for this podcast.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.